Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. It's been a pretty good week. My ears are better, I can hear again. England won against Germany, and Tottenham Hotspur have a new head coach. Finally, we've brought an end to 72 days of utter chaos, mess. As I've said before, probably the most difficult period of reporting in my entire, 18 years as a journalist. But we got there. It might not be exactly where we wanted to be, but we got there. So, Nuno Espirito Santo is the new head coach of Tottenham Hotspur. As I said, certainly wouldn't have been the person I think 99.9% of us would have picked the day after Jose Mourinho was relieved of his duties, or on the day even. But here we are. And yes, it's incredibly underwhelming. Yes, Tottenham buried the news in the middle of the night pretty much after Rafa Benitez had been announced by Everton and after the Jadon Sancho to Manchester United news. And you just know someone at Tottenham went, "Quick lads, get it out now. Go, 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 go." But, again, as I've done with, as I did with Paulo Fonseca and as I did with many others, of course, do more research into it, look at more things, try to understand decisions a little bit better. Also, get a little bit more insight from, various people around the club and outside the club, people who know him, just to get a little bit more of a balanced view, because that's what I'm here to do. And hopefully I can pass some of that on to you guys and girls. Let's start with the basics. I must say, actually, apologies for the delay in doing this. First off, I wanted to wait until there was actually something really concrete and new. Then I knew about, I think I said, was it about 2 weeks ago, I said, don't rule out Nuno Espirito Santo. Paratici really likes him. A couple of days ago, I started to hear really kind of concrete stuff that this was going to happen. Actually, no, it was about a week ago now. And then a couple of days ago, I heard, okay, looks like we're going to get there now. And then I was going to do a video last night, and Spurs decided to announce it. I kind of had a feeling that they maybe would have waited till today. But like I say, the cynical side of me does think they suddenly saw an opening to get everything out there, and they did. So I had to I had to put off my plans to do the video. I thought, let's give it another day then, just to see what extra little bits come our way in terms of interviews and unveilings. And as it was, we got words from the chairman, we got words from Paratici, we got words from Nuno Espirito Santo, so I can talk about all of that. So it all works. It all worked in the end, and hopefully you didn't mind waiting that extra day. So the basics. So the Portuguese, 47-year-old Portuguese, has signed a 2-year deal, but I'm informed that it's with an option for a 3rd year, should the club want to take that up. And we all hope they do, because if they do, it means that he's been a big success. He is currently self-isolating at the Lodge, which, if you're not aware, is the very swanky, luxurious 5-star hotel at Hotspur Way, the training complex. He'll be there until kind of midway through next week. The plan is, as it always is that the Tottenham players, the non-internationals, will return on Monday. They'll go through all the sports science team tests that they go through. They have loads of testing and things. You often see it every year. There's always photos and videos of them doing bleep tests, things like that, and various things in the gym. And what the plan is, that either Tuesday or Wednesday, Nuno Espirito Santo will come out of his isolation and will be able to immediately start work on the pitches with them. It'll all sync up quite nicely, apparently. And what also gives him, sitting there in isolation in his very nice room, he gets to absolutely plan pre-season. He gets to spend every minute over the next, 5-6 days, utterly planning it to the very minute detail. With his coaching staff, that's still to, it may be that as I'm filming this, or it may be when you watch this that has been finalised, but that's still yet to be announced. I have my reservations. It will be quite the enormous backroom staff that he had at Wolves. I think he may have to prune a couple of those because certainly cost-wise, not only taking them on, but obviously the future down the line of having to get rid of that many staff members is something that clubs don't often take. And apparently, I think Everton, there was a few issues with that when he spoke to them. So, yeah, let's see what happens with them. Obviously, I don't really want to go into too much detail about the various members of his backroom staff, because at this moment there may be some that come and some that don't. So once that is announced, I will properly dig into all their background and be able to explain a little bit more about them to you. As I've said before, I'd be stunned if Ledley King isn't included as, not, I hate using this expression, the work experience boy, but as someone who's going to be there to learn. You know, anyone that thinks Ledley King is the main defensive coach for Tottenham Hotspur, you know, under Mourinho and all that, he wasn't. He's a guy very much learning his trade, none of his major qualifications yet, and that's what he's working towards. So you'd think that he will be part of those discussions. As I said before, Ryan Mason, I'd be more surprised because I was told that he was going to head back to his head of development role within the academy. But, you know, who knows? Nuno Espirito Santo may sit down with him and say, look, I really think you could learn a lot from me and I can learn a lot from you about Tottenham and come into my team. But that one would surprise me certainly a lot more than King. So, yeah, the actual unveiling itself. Like I said, it was properly buried. In the middle of the night, I'd kind of, like I say, I'd packed up my work for the day and I was all kind of planning to do my video and starting to think about what I was going to talk about. I think the key thing, obviously, is that there's the underwhelmed nature of a lot of people. I think there's that aspect to it, but I also think there's probably maybe people like me are just at that stage where, oh, thank God it's over. Which it shouldn't be the way. It shouldn't be the way that you kind of come to the end of your managerial search, that people are just happy the bloody thing is over. But I think a lot of kind of fans, I got the sense of, okay, he wasn't my first choice, or probably in my top 5 choices or more, and certainly with Tottenham, he wasn't in there. You know, he wasn't even on their original list before Paratici came in, and I'd even say on Paratici's list, he wasn't in the top 3 at least. But it's the way the fickle finger of fate works. You know, sometimes it lands upon the person that you don't expect it to be. And as I've always said in these videos, and I've said things before, when Tottenham kind of have actually made progress in recent years, it's been through a coach or head coach, a manager, whatever you want to call it, who was not their first choice. It's always the backup that's come in and done the job. You know, Jacques Santini, they waited a whole season. Martin Jol had to pick up the pieces, push the club on. Juande Ramos, their first choice, came in, didn't do the job. Some might argue the League Cup was, but ultimately in the Premier League he was an utter kind of failure, really. Harry Redknapp had to come in, pick up the pieces again. And then, you know, they wanted Louis van Gaal, they looked at Frank de Boer, and eventually Mauricio Pochettino got the job, and he did a very good job. So, you know, that's why there's a part of me that never writes off these people that just end up getting a job. I think also I want to say it's been some unfair stuff written about Espirito Santo in terms of, you know, rejected by Wolves, sacked by Wolves, rejected by Everton, rejected by Palace. Now look, Tottenham have ended up with him, and that's not really the way it's been. It's not. Wolves was very much, from everything I'm hearing from people that report on the club, it was more of a mutual thing. I think he needed a bit of a break, he needed a bit of a rest. Maybe a sense that he could have possibly taken them as far as he could, and probably coincided with Wolves wanting a bit of a fresh start as well. So that happened that way. Everton, like I say, I think there were certainly advanced talks held. I think there was some kind of, they weren't delighted about the whole backroom staff thing and such a big team, and that never really got to the conclusion. It wasn't really rejected, it just never got there. As with, Tottenham Hotspur and various talks they've held. And Crystal Palace, from what I understand, that was almost done. And actually, that was... so I'm told that Espirito Santo actually made some kind of late demands in the deal about trying to get a little bit more sway on transfers. And obviously with the Jorge Mendes connection, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, that kind of made Palace and it all kind of fell apart. So yeah, I wouldn't say that he's been rejected by all these clubs, and now Tottenham have picked up the kind of, and I even saw people saying that Fenerbahce rejected him. The Fenerbahce stuff was weird. Came out of one radio station in Turkey, I think, and that was it. And everyone seized upon it as if it was the thing. I saw even Gary Lineker tweeting about, Even Nuno Espirito Santo's rejected Tottenham now. And it was a bit like, for me, a good way to judge that scenario was that the Turkish media report a lot of stuff. There are some very good journalists in Turkey, but there are a lot of media out there that just report some stuff that you're just like, what? None of that is even half true. And the fact that none of them even bothered to touch Espirito Santo as a subject kind of told you everything. I thought that was really weird, that it was almost like this red herring thrown out there. But yeah, so he's at Tottenham Hotspur. He spoke very well. And don't worry, people that are saying, but he doesn't fit any of the profile, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to talk about that. I am going to talk about that. I'm just going to talk about, let's get out the way first, the unveiling. And then when I talk about Paratici, I will come on to that. So Espirito Santo himself, I thought he spoke really well, to be honest with you. I thought the whole key to it was that he had to come in and his first address, kind of his interview, had to be very much an accessible guy, a good human being, and someone that you could kind of put your trust in. And I felt he did. He spoke about various topics, all the kind of buzzwords, spoke about like the young players, and the word DNA, which is doing my head in at the moment. I think someone at Tottenham Hotspur along the line, whether it's Daniel Levy, whether it's someone underneath him, like a PR type, has said to him, Tottenham DNA, Daniel. That's what you want to talk about. We'll get all the fans back on board. Talk about the Tottenham DNA. Honestly, just like once, fair enough. But my goodness, it's been overused. And it's one of those where anyone really can pick it apart by saying, what is Tottenham's DNA? Tottenham's, we're an incredibly grand old club. The 1960s, 61, the double winning team, incredible. Arthur Rose push and run side a decade earlier. Obviously Bill Nick as a player then and then took it on as a wonderful manager, legendary manager. Yes, you could argue that's Tottenham's DNA, but I'm sorry, but DNA doesn't go missing for 60 years. It's very difficult to talk about Tottenham's DNA. Yes, they became a cup team. Keith Birkinshaw obviously did some terrific stuff, but ultimately, relatively very little success in terms of silverware in the last 60 years. And I've said this before, I think I wrote an article on it about a week ago. Tottenham's DNA, really, of the modern era that Spurs, I think, are talking about, is the Pochettino DNA. I think that's what they're talking about. The kind of, the aggression, the pressing, the passion, the everything, the family atmosphere. I think that's what they're talking about, but without saying, yes, that guy that we sacked in 2019. So I don't like it. And it was overused in the unveiling. Espirito Santo clearly been told, talk about DNA, Nuno. Talk about DNA. They love it. They don't. It's actually winding up a lot of fans, I think. So he used the word about 5 or 6 times. Levy used it a couple of times. Overall, in the whole unveiling, it was a DNA extravaganza. It was weird. But aside from that, I thought he spoke very well. And I thought he spoke kind of quite from the heart in some stuff. There was some stuff that you could tell was very much led by what the club wanted him to talk about. Those main things, the style of play, the DNA, the using young players. But I thought the way he spoke about the club as a whole, I thought really reminded me of Mauricio Pochettino, to be honest with you. A lot of it, it's kind of, he sees everything as a unit. Every single department of the football club links together to create the success that the team has. And it was very Poch sounding. And the point where I really felt that was very Poch-like was when he was asked to do, as they do, and a little address straight to the camera to the fans. And it was only 10 seconds or so. And I just felt that was when he really came off script. And it felt like it was from the heart. It felt a little bit emotional, as in he was emotional. And he just kind of, I've done this impression before of Don Corleone in The Godfather. But it kind of had that little bit of a vibe to it. It was kind of like, we're going to make you proud. And he kind of repeated it. It's like, we're going to make you proud. We're going to make you proud. And I just kind of thought, okay, I like that. And it very much harked back to 2014. Poch, when he did a similar address to the fans, spoke a similar thing about making the fans proud. It's something I've harped on about in articles and things I've written and in these videos, that Tottenham is a club that is utterly fractured right now. The fans really have, a lot of them kind of just can't be bothered at the moment. They've really disenchanted with it all. I think the club have made so many mistakes on and off the pitch. And I've said repeatedly, I think the new man had to come in and make Tottenham fans proud of their club again. And I just thought it was really interesting that he came out with that kind of phraseology as well. There was a little moment that some people have picked up on when he gets to the end of his little message and he kind of goes, and like looks just off camera. And some people are joking, oh, is Levy holding a gun to his head? Is he holding cue cards up with what to say? I think he's doing a socially distanced interview and he's just looked off to the left to see the various team of cameramen and things like that who are over there. But no, I thought he spoke very well. I did. I thought he came across as a very personable human being. And as I'll explain later, I think I'm going to have my struggles as a media man. But I think the fans hopefully will connect with him. And everything I understand from those who work around in the Midlands and deal with Wolves and all that, the fans down there apparently really hold him in a huge regard. A bit like Spurs fans and Poch, a very similar thing. They see him as the man who, well, quite frankly, took him up from the Championship. 2 seventh place finishes for a newly promoted team. Often you'll get one that does very well and then the next season falls back down again, or at least goes down the Premier League table. But he didn't. He kept them in 7th place 2 years in a row, got him to Europa League. So they got a lot of love for him. You know, he didn't go well in his last season, but there's injuries, you know, in that as well. And he was kind of, I think, messing around with the system slightly, trying to find a new one that fitted without those key injured players. And it wasn't a great season. But yeah. No, I thought he came across well. He even had a little trim on his beard. He looked refreshed and recharged. He looked like a guy had landed a very big job for himself. And I think that's fair to say. And I think he's a guy who I get the impression won't care that he's not in the top 5, 7 choices, whatever you want to call it, or even was a choice at all before Paratici. I think he's a guy that knows that, you know, he's got a really good gig. You know, he couldn't make the demands that probably he could have made at the other clubs he'd spoken to this summer. He's at a club that are, you know, really pushing for Champions League football, an incredible stadium, incredible training ground. The structure's all there. As I've said before, just needs those little tweaks to make it terrific again. And I think he's very enthused by that, and I think he should be as well. But it was interesting as well, because just to give you a little bit of background. So Daniel Levy was undecided on Nuno Espirito Santo. This is what I've been told by people, you know, close to the situation inside the club. He was not enthused. I'm going to use that word again. He saw, as I've said myself in the past, a guy that in Nuno Espirito Santo who is more a counter-attacking coach, who obviously played under Mourinho, there's little fears, and I was told this by another journalist who covers Wolves, that, you know, essentially Mourinho 2.0, some slight differences, some slightly more entertaining football, but without the silverware. And from what I understand, Levy was worried that first game of the season against Manchester City, if there was an embarrassing defeat, his name would be chanted. You'd get the Levy out, you'd get the protests. Some might say that could still happen, whatever. But yeah, apparently he was very much undecided on whether he should be the new head coach. But Fabio Paratici fought for him. He was one of his choices, apparently, to become Juventus boss in replacing Andrea Pirlo. It was him and Gattuso. Yeah, I know. Let's not go there. And he said to him, he said to Levy, look, I'm going to show you examples. And apparently he showed him what Nuno Espirito Santo's team, Valencia side of the 2014-15 season was like. And that side was very different. It was, you know, Wolves obviously have become known mainly for the back 3, which would become a back 5, and very much hitting teams on the break. This Valencia team was a little bit different. There were still counter-attacking elements to it, but mostly it was an attacking 4-3-3 formation, sometimes a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-4-2 with a diamond. And they were a very good team. You know, Valencia, before he came along, they'd been languishing a little bit. They'd finished, I think, 5th and then 8th. And then he came along swept them back up into the top four, qualified for Champions League football. They scored 70 goals that season, which was fourth best in La Liga. They only conceded 32 goals, which was third best in La Liga. They beat Real Madrid at home, Atletico Madrid at home, drew with both of those two big sides away. I think Barcelona, they had a narrow defeat against Barcelona and then maybe a 2-0. I can't remember what the other result was. But essentially, they had real consistency. They had a lot of attacking endeavour as well as being strong at the back. Very different formations. They were very adaptive to the circumstances, and they beat big teams as well. So Paratici showed him this Valencia team, Levy, and said, look, this is a guy who has a clear philosophy, but he can adapt to clubs. He can adapt to what the personnel and the requirements of that club was. You look at his team at Porto that he had. You look at his team at Valencia. You look at his team at Wolves. And there's the original Portuguese team. Was it Rio Ave? I can never remember the exact name. But essentially, he's gone into every different club and he's worked out a system that will work for that club. And he said, pretty much, from what I understand, he and Espirito Santo both told Levy during talks, we'll do that with Tottenham. What you want, we'll provide. We'll just do it with real strength and discipline, and that's what we'll do. And apparently, Levy was sold, pushed the green light, and that is why we now have Nuno Espirito Santo. So Paratici's, they did a little interview with him at the unveiling, which I thought was quite interesting as well. Felt to me like a little bit of a jibe aimed at Jose Mourinho. He very much said, when he was asked about the key qualities of Espirito Santo, he said, we're going to be back to having discipline and working physically hard. And obviously, I think I've said this before, there was a lot of talk at Tottenham when Mourinho kind of parted company that the squad wasn't in a great physical shape. And, I know Man United reporters that have said similar when Solskjaer had to take over. I think with Mourinho, there's some people have claimed, his critics claim that he's more focused on the tactics and he believes that players should keep their own high levels of fitness. That should be down to them. Whereas you have someone like Pochettino, was very much someone that drilled. He wanted that high press, that aggressive nature, and he wanted them to be super silly fit to do that. And I do wonder whether we're seeing Harry Kane. Harry Kane under Pochettino was a lean, mean fighting machine. He was very, very ridiculously fit. And I do wonder whether, despite him having an incredible season, don't get me wrong, Mourinho has got the best out of Kane. He worked a team and a system around Kane that got the very best out of him. But I do wonder whether we're now seeing with England a Kane that's slightly more knackered. Has come to the end of the season, maybe doesn't have those fitness reserves he had before. But yeah, I just kind of felt that Paratici saying that was a little bit of a kind of a kickback, I felt, the Mourinho era. He wasn't there, but it sounds like he would have been told that by others. And he also said, that he kept using the words, and as this kind of leads into the stuff I was saying about how he convinced Levy, he used the word adaptive, he used the word adapting, he spoke about the various formations, the very different formations that Espirito Santo used at Valencia, Porto, and at Wolves, and essentially saying pretty much what I just told you the talks were all about, is like, this guy can change his system. He's flexible. He can do what is best for the club. And I think, bearing in mind, Daniel Levy once again came out with the "I told you I wanted." What was the exact phrase? Free-flowing, attacking, entertaining football. And I believe, and Fabio believes, that Nuno will provide that. So no pressure, Nuno, but you're going to have to do that because if you don't, Daniel Levy has his buffer in Paratici, and he also has his man who, didn't provide in Nuno Espirito Santo. So, yeah, it's going to be very, very, very interesting to see how it works now. Everything I've kind of heard was promising. What I would say, in a slightly kind of maybe going deeper into the words they used, I felt that it was interesting that Nuno Espirito Santo never used the word attacking at any point during his interview. And I'd also say that it was quite interesting that at no point did any of the three men, the three leaders at the top of Tottenham Hotspur, talk about winning things, winning silverware, trophies. This was very different to the Jose Mourinho unveiling. Jose Mourinho unveiling was all about the next level, winning the trophies, doing what Mauricio Pochettino couldn't. This one felt very much like, oh, we've made such a mess of things, we kind of just need to get back to where we were. And that's kind of how it came across to me. That honestly, look at it back, there's no talking of winning or silverware, trophies, anything. And I thought that was perhaps quite telling. And it shows that admitting that they've made mistakes and they're kind of having to go back to maybe where they were, I wouldn't say pre-Poch, although you could maybe argue in league position, possibly. But certainly a reset, I think, is probably the best way to put it. So, yeah. I mean, he is as a guy, everything I've been told about him, Nuno Espirito Santo, is that he is a leader. Players get on very well with him, connect with him. He is very disciplined. Those players will connect with him, but they will not be allowed to get away with any rubbish. He will work them physically hard. I think it's quite interesting that when he left Valencia, he went on a bit of an instructional journey as a coach, went to see various coaches, and one of the people he came to watch was Mauricio Pochettino. He came to Hotspur Way, spent the day with him, had some apparently really great conversations, the two of them, and learned a lot about each other. And I think certainly in terms of fitness-wise, it's similar to Poch. I think he works his players very hard. Similar aspects of Poch as well, that he normally likes working with a bit of a smaller squad. So to keep everyone happy and keep that family unit. And like I say, the overarching feeling of the club as a unit rather than the team and then every other dog's body in the background. I thought there's definitely parallels there. I think some will look for parallels with Mourinho. Some will look for parallels with Pochettino. Probably the answer is somewhere in between. Am I excited about it? I said that as if someone was asking me that question. It's just rhetorical. I wouldn't say I'm excited about it. I wouldn't say I'm quite as underwhelmed and despondent about it how I was when I first was told don't rule him out because he could be the next head coach. Because that's what research does. That's what a little digging does. And certainly looking at some of the football Wolves played, it's got a hail of goals to get up into the Premier League in the first place. And as a counter-attacking football goes, even their football on the counter-attack was breathtaking. It was superb, and they used the ball really nicely. But yeah, he's a guy that's played in a lot of different ways, and I'll be very intrigued to see. I think we'll start to get a sense of it in pre-season, and we'll certainly get to see whether the players at the back keep the ball as well, and it's looked to be moved through the team rather than lumping it long and stuff like that. And I think he obviously will be the players he gets at his disposal. Yeah. No, I wouldn't say I'm down about it. I wouldn't say I'm absolutely over the moon. I'm jumping about. I wouldn't say that watching all the unveiling yesterday gave me a warm, fuzzy feeling. And I was sitting there thinking, oh, future's bright, future's lily white and all that sort of stuff. I think I watched it. I was like, okay, let's give this guy a chance. And I think that's the key thing. I think people now, whatever your views, whatever you kind of thought about it, whatever you think of Levy, whatever you think of Paratici, I think Nuno Espirito Santo needs to be given a chance now. I think that's the absolute key thing about it all. If he goes in there and he's off to a losing wicket already, can't mix in my sports there, but if he is, it's not going to go anywhere. There'll be a toxic atmosphere and you can't work in those circumstances. The momentum, the pressure, all of that will mount and the players will lose they'll be distracted and they'll lose faith and it's all this tumbling snowball of kind of rubbish. I hope that he's given a bit of time by the fans. We know how social media is now. We know how quickly people turn. I mean, Pochettino, even he, with the credit he had in the bank for everything he did, fans soon turned against him towards the end and there were quite a few that wanted him out, and probably be interested to see how many of those then wanted him back. I don't know. It's the way football works. We're all fickle. We all are. Honestly, I'm no different. I do not remove myself from that category whatsoever. But yeah, I think he needs a fresh slate, a blank canvas. That's what he's going to get. And so yeah, it'll be interesting in pre-season as well because he's going to be benefit from the fact. I think I've said this before that he's going to have a large group of players to work with in a summer that's got international tournaments. Normally, Spurs have done very well across the year in a season, and they go into tournaments with loads of representatives, but they really don't. I think it was only maybe 7 at the Euros, and you're already going to have Lloris, Sissoko, Roden, Davies back a little bit earlier because they've obviously exited the competition. You've only got Lo Celso and Sanchez at the Copa America, and obviously how long that lasts, we'll have to see. But yeah, it's he's going to have a big old group of players to instantly get his philosophy and methods across. And I think that's going to be crucial, absolutely crucial to how he kicks off what will be a very difficult season. You know, what you don't want coming into a new job is to have Arsenal and Chelsea to play twice within your first 9 games, because you've got to play them twice in friendlies, and an opening match against the reigning champions, Manchester City. You can only hope maybe that they'll have had so many players at the Copa America and the Euros that they will have only just got back a lot of their key players just in the days before the match. But, you know, that's no guarantee as well. It's a huge, huge thing start to the season. And that's why I say I think he needs as much backing as he can get. And if they do lose that first game, it needs to be that the fans don't turn against him, because if they, you know, Poch had this. Poch back in 2014, you know, he readily admitted by November he feared he was going to get the sack because things weren't quite going his way. He wasn't quite able to get all of his methods and philosophy across. And then they had that turning point game against Aston Villa where they were losing with, was it maybe 15, 20 minutes to go? I think it was Chadley scored, didn't he? And then obviously that Kane deflected free kick. And from that point, he decided, right, stuff this. All of the clique that don't want me, the experienced kind of vocal players, you're out. I'm just going to focus on this group of younger players and we're going to do something. And he did. And it's kind of one of the merits of patience and giving people time. And I do hope he gets that. I really do. But yeah, look, I understand that this nutty Tottenham search has gone from a very clear profile of a very clear, entertaining, attacking coach. It has taken us from, you know, Spurs have had talks with Pochettino, Ten Hag, they sounded out Hansi Flick. Julian Nagelsmann was someone that they'd looked at certainly before Mourinho and thought about again this summer. Brendan Rodgers, all these guys that fitted the profile. Then Paratici's come in. That list has been ripped up. They've then gone on to, you know, Antonio Conte, wasn't it, first, who is a huge name, one of the top managers of the world. Didn't fit the profile, but I understood why he excited people. Then they went from that to Paulo Fonseca, who was all but signed up. You know, the contract set out for him and agreed, and he was going to sign it. The visa's been set for his family. Then Paratici pulled the plug because he wasn't happy and he didn't feel he came across particularly well in the face-to-face talks in Milan and Como. And also happened to be that Gennaro Gattuso became available. That I'm not even going to go into the Gattuso mess. But that obviously fell apart within 24 hours as well. Julian Lopetegui at Sevilla was sounded out. And then after all of that, 72 days later, Nuno Espirito Santo is appointed. And I get it. I get a frustration. I get the underwhelmed feeling about it. But ultimately, this is where we are now. And I think you just have to put your faith in a guy who, he's no bad coach whatsoever. He's done terrific things at Wolves. And like I say, brand of football at Valencia, you know, he got a lot of plaudits. He got a ton of Manager of the Month awards, I think, as well in La Liga. This is a guy who I think should be given a fair crack of the whip and to see what he can do. Like I say, he hasn't got a particularly long contract, 2 years plus an option for a third, which very much is kind of testing the water with him. And he'll have. I know I say he needs patience and time, but he knows that he'll have to certainly look like he's taken the team somewhere because it will not be expensive to get rid of him. But yeah, give the guy time, honestly. Jorge Mendes, I was going to talk about him. So, the elephant in the room, or the Portuguese agent, the super agent in the room. I'd probably say the fears over Mendes are perhaps overplayed in this scenario. Yes, their links are there. You know, he has a good relationship with Paratici. I don't think it's any coincidence. Three of Paratici's six. Was it six candidates? I've written them down here. Yeah, no, five candidates. Three of Paratici's five candidates for the job were Serie A managers, and three of them were also Mendes linked or Gestafute agency. But what I would say, and also Nuno Espirito Santo, it should be said, was Mendes' first ever client. I think he was working like a video store, like a video rental store, and he became his first ever client. He was a goalkeeper back then, would eventually play under Mourinho. But what I would say is, anyone that's fearing a repeat of Wolves and what happened there, it's not going to happen at Tottenham. What I think will happen more with the Mendes relationship is that he will open some doors for Tottenham. But you're not going to see, Wolves had 16 Mendes players parked there essentially. Some of them not there now, but 16 players came through the doors. But that was because the owners of Wolves, Fosun International, they kind of had this relationship with Mendes beforehand, and when he took over, it was a relationship between them all, which kind of self-serving thing. It's not going to be the same at Spurs. You could see Daniel Levy being told who to sign and then to sell on for the set price. It's not going to happen. And what I also would say is Paratici does have this relationship with him, but that's actually, if you look at it clearly, at Juventus, over 11 years at Juventus, Paratici only signed 3 Mendes clients. That was the big deal, Cristiano Ronaldo. That was Cancelo as well. And it was Danny Motta as well, a younger player. And that's all it was. So 11 years. Bear in mind, Mendes has his Gestafute agency, I think, represents 122 players. Only 3 during those 11 years. So I wouldn't look at this and think, oh, God, we're going to be Portugal FC. We're going to have all of these Mendes players. He's going to dictate what happens. It's not going to be the case. And like I said before, Nuno Espirito Santo would not have come in making demands that Mendes had to provide all his players. He can't do that at this level of job. I know we may laugh at that and think, God, Tottenham, that level. But they are. They are a big club that just need to be woken up again. And I think he knew that was not going to be an option at Tottenham. Spurs have worked with Mendes in the past. Matt Doherty, obviously. Carlos Vinicius. Mourinho was Mendes. Joseph Fernandez, I think Mendes acted as intermediary. He wasn't his agent, but I think there was an intermediary element to it. So they've worked with him before. It's not like he's some guy that's going to be alien to him and suddenly going to be walking the door and go, hello, lads, have I got a player for you? It's not going to be like that. He would never talk in that way anyway. But yeah, so I wouldn't fret about that side of it. I think it may just be that there's some players they might get for a slightly better price, and that's it really. But yeah, it's a big test, I think, for Paratici, because Paratici has battled to get his man, albeit his 5th choice, but he's got his man, and that's not fair. It may be that he wanted Espirito Santo higher up the food chain, as it were, but Levy needed to be convinced, so he looked at other more attacking candidates. Let's give him that. But very much, he got his way. He won the battle with Daniel Levy, and this is what a lot of people have called for. A lot of fans have called for Daniel Levy to delegate power, give up the football decisions, and give them over to a new man. So a very successful guy, Paratici has come in, and he's taken that decision-making, and he's convinced, because ultimately Levy still has to give the green light to everything, but he's come in and he's got his way with a coach who we know doesn't really fit the profile. Yes, he can adapt to the profile, but he's not the clear and obvious candidate to fit that profile, and that's why he wasn't on the original list. So I think for Paratici to get his own way shows that he's got that backing, he's got that belief. Levy chased him for, I think it was 5 years to get him from Juventus, and he finally got him. And this is the thing, Paratici is no mug. I know we haven't been particularly impressed with the standard of candidates that have come out since he's come in, but certainly in terms of transfers and stuff, this guy is no mug. He, a lot of people say, he's got probably the best contacts book out there in terms of the people he has great relationships with, the clubs he has terrific relationships with, and his ability to spot talent. A lot of the young players that he bought into Juventus were superb, and he was still doing that towards the end. And I think that fits Tottenham's profile nicely. These young players that can become real stars and get them in at a decent price. He can do that. So this guy is no mug. And I think this transfer window, I do actually have quite high hopes as long as he can get the money. That may either come from Levy loosening the purse string somewhere or making some sales, getting the players out the door. But I think if he has the funds to work with, I'd be, I think he'll bring in some very good players to Tottenham Hotspur. He will have to adapt to Premier League and understand what that needs. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if he leans on Steve Hitchen, the technical performance director, and because he'll have a good understanding of Tottenham. He has a good understanding of the Premier League, and together, two men working together, I'd expect them to make some good choices. And I'm quite intrigued to see. I'm going to talk about transfers in a little second, but yeah, very much. Paratici is now the buffer to Levy. That was always the plan. That was always the case, that he was going to be the man that was going to be the face and voice of the hierarchy. That's always been our biggest complaint, me as well, that we don't get much out of Levy. We don't get much out of the board. We don't hear from them. And Paratici in Italy, he was used to speaking every match about the decisions being made by the powers that be at Juventus. He was one of them. And now he is that at Tottenham. So I'm very much hoping that we're going to get more access to him media-wise. And in doing so, though, he becomes the figure for the fans. They're already turning against him over certain things. Levy is probably sitting there going, like hiding behind him as a human shield. And yeah, if things go wrong, very much he'll take the stick for it. I don't think people will let Levy off. I don't believe that. But I think there will be another man in the way, a bit like Hitchen got as well in recent years. I think Paratici will now be an even more visible representation of that. I don't think Hitchen probably would have got as much had there not been all that silly stuff out of the Amazon documentary that was still I've spoken about it before, so I'm not going to go into it too much, but it was a weird misquote. But yeah, I think Paratici now is in the line of fire, and I think so is clearly Espirito Santo. And it'll be interesting to see how they all operate, and I really hope it's in a good way as well. I said I'm going to talk about transfers, so I will talk about that as well. I think Tottenham certainly are making moves into trying to get Bologna's Japanese centre-back. I want to get his name right, so I'm going to read it out. Takehiro Tomiyasu. He's only 22. He fits a lot of Tottenham's kind of ticks their boxes. He's not going to be very expensive. Probably under 20 million you're looking at by the sounds of it. From what I am told, the logic behind going for him is that, and this may ring a bell, so tell me if it does, getting him in, he's essentially, he can play centre-back, but he's more so a defensive right-back. So think Japhet Tenganga, think Juan Foyth, that kind of mould, and you already hear people in the background saying, so why didn't you just keep them? Tenganga is there, but you know what I mean. But the logic I understand from going for Tomiyasu is that he will tuck in to allow the Espirito Santo system to quickly flip from a back four to a back three and allow Sergio Reguilon to bomb on like an absolute kind of almost like a left wing back, which we know will get the best out of him. And if you're wondering why that sounds familiar, it's because it's very similar to what the plan was with Sergio Aurier. It was certainly Mourinho's first season was for Sergio Aurier to bomb on and Ben Davies tuck in and make that back three. So yeah, that's where you're going to have your Mourinho comparisons. But also, I like quite a fluid team. I like a team that can switch quickly in that respect. What I would say is where that leaves Matt Doherty is going to be interesting, because obviously he's not the kind of guy that is going to tuck in on the right at all. So unless they just switch it up when they have Davies do that and that allows Doherty to get in, and maybe different games they switch it up with one right back or the left back gets to bomb on, I don't know. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's a done deal, but from the sounds of it, it sounds like certainly a move that Tottenham could make happen. And bearing in mind Foyth's already gone, they've got the money in from Foyth. That can certainly go towards this deal, which isn't too far from being a similar price. So it's kind of a bit of a like-for-like swap for Foyth, really. But yeah, he's 22, he's a talented lad. Hearing good things about him. And of course, it's all about how he adapts to the Premier League as well. In terms of other names I've seen out there, Jules Kounde, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, the Sevilla centre-back, Frenchman, who's 22. People are very excited about him. What I would say, Tottenham are interested in him. Tottenham do like him. He's certainly a player of interest. But I would add the caveat, so are a lot of other teams. And he will, when I talk about Tomiyasu coming in with a cheaper price tag, Kounde will not. Not at all. I think his release clause is something like 69 million. It probably is that he won't go for that, but you're talking big money. Tottenham would have to sell some serious players to raise the funds to bring in a player like that. There's a part of me that wonders whether they still go in for Jorge Mendes, who obviously was I said this before, was set to be a summer target for Tottenham. Paratici coming in will be interesting because obviously former was it a Sampdoria player, obviously then at Lyon, and then on loan at Fulham. So Paratici should know him well. So it'd be interesting to see whether that's a deal that they push through if they feel Kounde is just too much competition and out of their price range, which I fear he may be, but I hope he isn't because clearly he's a talented player. Milenkovic, obviously at Fiorentina, is another one that they liked, and again is a player that Paratici will know well. But you know, the priority is that defence, and I think the fact that they're kind of tying up this centre back / right back in Tomiyasu is going to be is a key thing, and I think they will still look to bring in a full natural centre back as well. You know, the good thing about Tomiyasu as well is that if they do switch to a back three in games, he can play on the right side of that back three. You know, it's a bit like Cole Walker's doing for England certainly against Germany, he did it. So yeah, that to me is quite interesting. And then I think once they get those defensive, they know defence is the biggest problem of all. And I think once they've got that lined up, and then you'll start to see them looking at more attacking players and very much replacing players who go out. You know, I think with Tomiyasu coming in, that also frees them up to let Aurier go, and that will in turn bring in more money, and that can go to a centre-back or elsewhere in the team. It's all like these weird building blocks that they have to kind of get the old ones out and replace them with the new ones. And you know, I do think, I've said it before, I think it will be a bit of a summer of change at Tottenham. I do think it will be. I think we're going to see a fair few of the kind of older players or ones coming towards the end of their contracts heading out the door. And I think there'll be a refresh. And I don't think that's a bad thing at all for a new manager to have that. And I think, especially with the younger players, I'd love to see Espirito Santo use Oliver Skip. I'd love to see him bring in Sessegnon. I think it's a bit more difficult for Sessegnon because I can't see Davies leaving, and I'd be surprised if Reguilon does, which unless he uses Sessegnon as a more attacking left-sided player, which hasn't been the plan in the last year or so, I wouldn't be shocked if Sessegnon goes back out on loan. He's got a long contract, so he can get away with another year. But for Skip, for me, once he's back from that fractured metatarsal, get him in that midfield. Honestly, I would love... People are probably thinking, what are you talking about, you nut? But I would love to see a double pivot of Højbjerg and Skip, because I believe both of them have that ability to also take the ball up the pitch, pass the ball and be more creative. We're seeing this with Højbjerg at the Euros, and I have seen a lot of Skip at youth level and academy level, and I know he can do that. And I do wonder, it'd be interesting. Norwich look like they're going to bring in Billy Gilmore, which some might say potentially they could also bring in on loan Skip and they could play the two together. Personally, I think that's a bit of a risk, playing two very young players in the centre of your midfield in your return to the Premier League. I kind of wonder whether they are doing that because they've kind of been told Skippy's not going anywhere, or there's another loan lined up. Personally, I'd love to see him stay at Spurs because I think those two in there, get maybe Dembele in front of them, that could be very sexy. It really could. Oh God, that sounded awful. But yeah, I like the sounds of it. That's probably what I should have said rather than that very creepy way of describing it. Yeah, I think we've covered pretty much everything I was going to speak about. I mean, obviously, touched on Harry Kane briefly, but what a relief to see him score that goal against Germany. It was fantastic. I'm one who, whether it's from tribal roots as a fan, maybe being more Spurs inclined than international match inclined, and also having a bit of a weird messed up kind of heritage. My mum's Scottish, so I've got half my family Scottish. I was born in England, so was my dad, but then there's grandparents on his side, one's Russian, one's Polish, so I've got a right old mix. So for me, I wouldn't say I've always been the most intense England fan when it comes to international matches. Probably, I get swept up in tournaments. Of course I do. I probably hadn't until that Germany game this time around. But I just think for Kane, whatever you think about the timing of his interview at Spurs, whatever you think about the fact that, look, let's be honest, probably does want a bit of a fresh challenge ahead of him. I think everything he's done for Tottenham, and I think he'll continue to do, because I don't think he'll get his move this summer anyway. We all wanted to see him score. We all did. And it was a very good improvised header, which I think has slightly gone under the radar. People have just kind of talked about the effect of the goal. But actually, he had to really kind of improvise his body shape to put that in the goal. It was slightly behind him from Grealish, who was a proper match game changer. So no, I was delighted to see it. And I loved seeing him all emotional at the end when Sweet Caroline was playing. He was doing his ITV interview. It was lovely. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how far he goes. And who knows what England could do? It could be a very, very interesting summer. But England are kind of a bit like Spurs. You can't allow your hopes to go too high, because they will crush them. They will crush them in an instant. But yeah. But back to Spurs. Nuno Espirito Santo is the man. As a journalist, it's going to be interesting to see. Everything I'm told by fellow reporters in the Midlands is that he's very difficult to deal with as a journalist. Apparently, if you sit down with him and have a face-to-face without the cameras and all that, he's very personal, very interesting. We'll talk tactics, which is what Poch was like as well when the cameras were off. He was very interesting. However, when the cameras are on, apparently it's just a bit of a nightmare. Doesn't really want to do it. Doesn't really want to speak about much. Won't talk about individuals. So all of you guys and girls that have asked me in the past, ask about Ondebele. Ask about why this player isn't playing. Sounds like I'm going to have no chance. He will not even... He's actually, by the sounds of it, stormed out of press conferences because he just couldn't be bothered to ask questions. So that side of it, I don't know whether I'm going to have to learn some Portuguese, whether I'm going to have to try and win him over. I'd hope that the press team at Tottenham have a word and say, look, this is a different level to what you were at Wolves. No disrespect to Wolves, terrific team, but this is a different level. You're going to be asked lots more searching questions. There's going to be a lot more pressure and expectation. You're going to be asked about players leaving. Poor old Ryan Mason had Super League, Harry Kane, Gareth Bale, everything, didn't he, within his first few days. And if I'd hope they'd say to him, look, if you're going to be a bit arsey with the press, they're not going to give you a lot of time. They're not going to give you a lot of time at all. And coupled with the fans maybe not giving you a lot of time, that's going to be a bad mix for you. And I'm not saying the press will deliberately look to go at him. But what I'm saying is that when, let's use Pochettino for instance, and Mourinho. With Pochettino and Mourinho, I had a very good relationship with them both. They were very interesting whenever I asked a question. Pretty much 99% of the time, they gave me a really interesting full answer that they really thought through. And I think naturally as a journalist, when you've got a decent relationship with the manager, you're even more objective. You give them that little bit more patience. Sometimes when other journalists who don't know them will go in hard on something that's happened, you maybe look at it in a different view and understand it. But perhaps mentally, if you've got a manager who just doesn't really care for you whatsoever or care for what you've got to do, naturally you maybe become a little bit more critical of elements because you don't understand it, because you haven't had it explained to you properly. And I hope that will be explained to him, and we'll see a slightly different one. He's got to be full on his public relations game, in his first press conference. I'm not sure yet when that's going to be. Obviously, he's in isolation at the moment, so it would have to be over Zoom, and I think the club would probably prefer to do an in-person one. So whether it's going to be during pre-season or not, obviously I'll keep you updated. Whether it will be before one of the friendlies, after one of the friendlies, I don't know. But, he's got to get a lot of tricky questions. He's instantly going to be asked about, someone's going to ask him about not being any of the first choices and all of that. And that's a difficult question to answer. And, he's going to be asked about Kane. He's going to be asked about various decisions that Tottenham have made and his attacking and his style of football. It's not going to be an easy ride for him, and I think how he deals with that is going to very much set the tone for the rest of his tenure. So it's going to be interesting to see. But ultimately, in the day, we have a new head coach. Tottenham Hotspur have a new head coach. I can now start writing and talking about different things. I can start talking about transfers. I can start looking at the structure and the future for Tottenham going forward, rather than just having to tell you, sorry, Tottenham were in advanced talks with this coach, but they've collapsed at the last minute. Now I can say that about players instead. So, let's see where it goes. Like I say, not to be patronising, but please do try to give him a bit of time. If you weren't someone that wanted Nuno Espirito Santo, it's not his fault that he's been picked. By all means, if you're frustrated with people above, that is absolutely your right to vocalise that. But I just think with Espirito Santo, if he and the team are to stand any chance this season, they need people to unite behind them. And I will certainly be giving him an absolute fresh slate and a clean blank canvas to kind of do what he's got to do. And I hope that the fans do as well. I don't think they probably will, some of them, but I hope the majority do. Because, like I say, he seems like a good guy. Whatever I have been told about the media element of it, he seems like a good guy. And I think the players will like him and will respond to him. And at the end of the day, we just want Tottenham Hotspur to do well. Because, as I said, and as he said, we want the fans to be proud of this football club again. They really should, or they really want to at least. It is a grand old club. And more than anything, we'd like to see it back to where it once was. I'd even take where it was under Poch right now. Let's be honest. That would be a huge improvement on what we've seen in the last couple of years. But that's a whole other story. Anyway, I'm going to head off now. I'll probably finish doing this and some other big thing has happened, which I'll have to say, sorry, this was filmed just before that happened. But hopefully I don't. As always, stay safe, stay healthy, look after yourselves. And I shall talk to you later. Bye.